I've got my microphone on. Okay, you got it on. And are we running on the internet now? Everything's cool? Because my wife is watching us from home. Hi, baby. Yep. Uh, you probably appreciate her being there. Not only did she hurt her back, but also she has a bad cold now. And that came on her. She stayed at home. So she'd been in the home. She got her accident that she had. And then, so a week later, plus 3 more days, so about 10 days after her accident, she actually tried driving. And she went over to get her medicine, her inhaler, at the grocery store. And in the grocery store, she was in this, so she did a little bit of grocery shopping too. Next day, she had a real bad cold. Why did you go out and do that? You just should have stayed home and let me do everything. And, but that's my wifey. So, and we didn't want to bring that, although I'm bringing it into the church a little. I'm not as bad a shape as she is. And I'm using lots of hand sanitizer. I'm using lots of it, so we should be pretty good shape. Pastor Joel asked me to do this class today. Is this the last one? No, it's not the last one yet, but it must be nearing it, isn't it? Yeah. I think there's only a couple more left probably. And of course, we're talking about something that I have got zero, I do no counseling for this. I can't prepare for this. I don't know how. So I went to Campus Crusade and said, what do they got on this anyway? And they have some pretty good stuff, actually. And so what I'm going to go through today is actually Campus Crusade stuff. And I've got whatever I did with them, right here. I've got about a dozen. You might want to pick them up afterwards, because what we're going to go through on these are 9, I think, misconceptions about depression. Facing depression as a Christian, and then the misconceptions about it. And probably by now, you guys have got a lot of the misconceptions down and figured out, because this class, we've had a number of classes on this. Even well-meaning people will give bad advice. I am sure that I have given bad advice because I don't, or they don't, or most people don't understand too much of the truths about depression. The one thing is for sure, if you're a Christian, you cannot be depressed, or you should not be depressed and still be a Christian. And depression isn't even real, really. Okay, I said those stupid things just to get your attention. Okay, thank you. Dead silence in the church. It was almost like saying Jesus isn't the Son of God. Dead silence. You better be saying something else, Pastor Gary, real quick. All right, the misconception number 1 is depression is not real. Depression is not real. That's misconception number 1. But the reality is that depression is a real illness that impacts the brain's ability to function as it should. Why would you say that the misconception that depression is not real, why is that dangerous? People have the misconception. Here's the misconception. Depression isn't real. And if they believe that, why is that dangerous? There could be a lot of them. You don't know what I'm looking for, so I may as well tell you. Because you could come up with a lot of answers, I'm sure. So if a doctor prescribes some kind of antidepressant drugs for your child or for your wife, or even possibly for the husband, I only say that because usually the father, the husband's the one that says, no, wife, you're not going to take that. No, kids, you're not going to take that. And so because of that, that's the danger of it. Depression isn't real. You don't need any meds for it. It's not real. It's all up here in your head. Second misconception is that depression is a sin. Depression is a sin. How many would hold up your hand and say, depression is a sin? I really believe that. Depression is a sin. I probably would have held my hand up 40 years ago, because I was raised with the idea that depression really is a problem that you're having in your mind. It is a spiritual warfare going on, and depression is a sin. A variation of this misconception is, and this is by Campus Crusade, being depressed means you're failing to trust God. Right? That's the way sometimes we feel, and that's the way that others feel about us. And being depressed means you are failing to be joyful in all things or to give thanks to God. Right? I mean, that's the way we beat ourselves up with, and that's the way sometimes we beat up others with that misconception. So the absolute truth is, depression is an illness. It's not a sin. Depression is an illness. It is not a sin. If I've got a cold now, would you say that, Pastor Gary, you've got a cold because of something sinful that you did? Well, you don't know. That's the point. It's not necessarily something that's sinful that I did. So at the same way that if somebody is depressed, you can't look at them and say, well, it's because it's something sinful that you did. Depression is not a sin, and depression is not a result of sin. Now, having said all of this, there are times when it is. Can a person get depressed when they resist the will of God? You bet. They can, and that's a sin. If you know to do the will of the Lord and you say, I'm not going to do it, and you eventually get pretty depressed over that kind of a battle, yeah, that can happen. So when I say this, but you can't put all categories in that. As a matter of fact, we know now that there's a very narrow amount of that really is a spiritual battle that's going on within an individual. One of the things that does happen to an individual is that there can be stress factors out here. There's triggers. A husband knows what. I know you're watching, honey. I know what I can say to trigger my wife, right? And she knows what she can do to trigger me. There are certain triggers out there that will happen to an individual that will trigger depression. It will come in. There are sinful things that people do to other people that will trigger depression. But the depression itself is not the sin. It's the results that's the sinful things, or the cause is the sinful things, not necessarily the results. Okay, misconception number 3 is depression will go away if you pray hard enough or have enough faith. Does that work for you? It'll go away if you pray hard enough, long enough, or if you have enough faith. Your depression will it'll go away. Just like your cold will go away. If you just had enough faith, your cold is going to go away. Your broken leg, if you have enough faith, it'll be healed. That's why I hated that my wife went to the doctor and got that pin put in her leg just because she broke her femur. I don't understand. Where's your faith, Jennifer? Right? So, and guess what? We did pray about that. We did pray for her, and we prayed a lot about the healing of her leg, and her leg did heal. But she still needed the outside help. She needed that pin desperately in her leg because her bones were so weak. So that happened. Because it's an illness, because mental or depression is caused by mental illness, and I hate that term mental illness too, because we also picture what mental illness is, right? It's the other wackos over there that are mentally ill. And so we kind of picture mental illness as being something extremely negative. I don't want to use names in here of people, but I have, I just don't want you to do it. But somebody that I know, a good friend of mine that's in the ministry, has to use certain drugs in order to keep his body in balance. And there's times when his body goes out of balance. And when his body goes out of balance, he gets high anxiety and he gets very depressed. The depression comes in. As a matter of fact, I get phone calls from him. And guess what? He's going through this anxiety and he's going through depression. But this is not just for depression. Anxiety is part of what we're talking about too. Because God says to be anxious over what? But you get anxious over things. What's the matter with you guys? Where is your faith? And so there's individuals, because of the chemical makeup that's going on in their brain, they are prone to a lot of anxiety in their life. There are actually, I forgot, this ties in with my Romans Bible study also. I happen to be dealing with that a little bit on Tuesday. And so from that Bible study, I just happened to be looking up some things, and there are a lot of genes that if a person has, you are way more likely to become an addict. Because these genes are passed along. And so it's a lot more difficult for that individual. And for some people that have high anxiety, that can be alleviated by taking certain drugs. I'll tell you one person that very few of you know in here, but his name was Tony Bartolucci. Tony Bartolucci is a pastor. And because he had high anxiety, he had to take some medication for that. Should he be taking medication for high anxiety? Or should he just let it go and say, I just got to deal with it. I will have faith that I can get through life with this high anxiety that I'm fighting constantly, wearing me out, and constant battle going on because of my anxiety that I have? Or should I take some medications that will smooth that out? What should he do? I mean, God made him the way that he is, therefore he should not take any medication. Same thing with somebody with diabetes. God made them the way that they are. They should not take any medication for the diabetes. Right? God made us the way that we are. A person has heart failure. He should not take any medication for the heart failure. Right? This medication stuff is ridiculous. If God wanted you to live longer, yes. That's absolutely right, George. God is the one that gave the doctors the wisdom and the medicine that's been developing over the years and the skills that's been developing over the years. That just didn't happen. God gave them the skills to be able to do that. That's something that we have to always remember, that it's part of it. Yeah. It's okay, George. You have epileptic seizures, but you trust God to deliver you from those. Yeah. Yep. There's medications out there that we take all the time to help control certain things, seizures, even headaches, even bad headaches. Should they take, if somebody's having what is called a migraine, which thank you, Lord, I've never had a migraine. Should they take some medication for that? I mean, so in the case of Tony, by taking the medication, he's a better pastor than he is without taking it. Yes. Yeah, I know you do. Yeah. Yeah. And God works everything. And here's the thing, even though not nice things happens to us, here's the beauty of the beautiful God that we have. All things work together for good. And your path is changed from going this way and it goes over to this way and over this way. I mean, I used to be a full-time pastor. I haven't been a full-time preaching pastor for 25 years. God changed the direction. God changes directions for people, and he takes whatever's going on that isn't so beautiful when we look at it from our point of view, and he turns it into something wonderful for an individual, the end result eventually, or down the paths. But Tony was asked to move on from his church. Okay, so that's one of the things that's very, you say, well, people nowadays, they don't react. Yeah, people still react that way. The misconception is that depression or anxiety will, if you pray hard enough or have enough faith, it will go away. But although there's great power in prayer, there's often the need to go beyond prayer. Misconception number 4, depression is a punishment from God. So a kind of variation from that might be, if you feel depressed, it is because you have unconfessed sin. If you feel depressed, it is because you have unconfessed sin. But here is the reality. Depression is not the fault of the person who is suffering. It is a difficult trial that can refine someone's faith, but it is not a punishment of sin or punishment for sin. God, when you look at yourself, you can't look at it and say, this depression that I'm going through, this depression that my friend is going through is a punishment by God. That is not correct. I have a little, I don't have, Campus Crusade gives this little illustration here. There's a lady by the name of Elizabeth, and she's the one that wrote a lot of this. After I shared my testimony with a group of students at my university, a friend came up to me and said, when I feel like that, like the punishments from God, my depression is, I try to figure out what I've done wrong that I need to confess. And Elizabeth says that comment, while totally inappropriate, was actually meant to be a helpful piece of advice, not a judgment. And so sometimes, and this is what Elizabeth say, well, let me finish what she says. Even in Jesus' day, people were eager to ascribe blame for illness and disability. Why is this sickness upon you? It's because you have sinned. Who sinned? His mother or his father? Was it his own sin? Somebody sure sinned here, because he wouldn't be in the situation he's in now. If it wasn't the physical shape he's in, he wouldn't be in that if it wasn't for sin. But certainly that was like for the individual that was born blind. The assumption was he was born blind because of what? Sin, punishment. Same thing is on depression. Depression is the idea that, okay, this depression is God's punishment. We're very fearful of God's punishment, aren't we? Because we know when we sin, God is not pleased with it. And we know that there's a consequence for sin, and there is. But to look at something that's physically wrong with us, or something that is extremely weighty upon us, that causes us to have anxiety, let me ask you this real quick. Is anxiety a sin? No. Okay, now what does Jesus say to do with your anxiety? Cast it on him. Cast all your cares, cast all your anxieties, cast everything on him. But in order for you to cast it upon him, what do you have to have? You have to have it first, right? You're not going to cast on him something that you don't have. Everybody has anxieties. And so we're to cast those. So just the anxiety in itself, but say, okay, on these anxieties, I'm going to trust in my meds alone. Is that the right thing to do? No, it isn't. Take your meds and get closer to God. Cast your anxieties upon him. But take your meds and cast your anxieties upon him. Don't just cast your anxieties upon him. Now, you may try at first to cast your anxieties, because there may be nothing really going on at all in your body. Maybe there's nothing going on. Maybe there, but a lot of times there's, I don't want to, never mind. I was going to go down a path I don't want to go down. Because that's a whole, I could be misunderstood, and that's going to be a whole nother lesson. Probably something Pastor Joel already covered anyway. So I'm not even going to say it. So depression is a punishment from God. No, it isn't. Misconception number 5. Depression is just an excuse for laziness and not doing your Christian duty. Or you're letting God and your church down if you're too depressed to serve or to minister. Does God measure your worth and his love for you on how much work you do? No, he doesn't. However much you do, however much you don't do, that does not change God's love for you. God's love, thank you, God. God's love is absolutely consistent. It never varies. I could be the greatest pastor on the planet, and God would not love me any more than he does right now. Nothing changes with God's love for me. That's just absolutely amazing. So, depression, and then you not being able to function is not a sin. Depression and you not being able to function in some kind of ministry is not a sin. But not dealing with that is where the issues come. I'm not going to deal with this depression. I'm not going to seek any help on it. I'm not going to try to get any kind of medication help. I'm just going to stay. Okay, that's terrible. One of the things that Campus Crusade uses as an illustration, but I don't think we need to even go there because we fully understand that God does not love us more because we're more busy. I think we understand that clearly. Number 6. Oh, here's something that they put in here, though, as a tag on the end of that. People who are depressed are already dealing with enough without being shamed for not doing enough. They're dealing with enough without having to endure the shame of not doing enough. All that they're dealing with right now, that's enough. Without saying, but you still need to do, this and that in the church. No, what needs to be done is we need to love them and help them to be healed in one fashion or another. Okay, misconception number 6. People with depression are unstable and cannot be trusted with church leadership or responsibilities. Or here's a variation of it. Depression is an indication of unconfessed sin or weak faith, so people with depression are not fit for leadership. One of the most depressed persons you'll ever see in history was Martin Luther. Very, very depressed man. Even after he was saved, there was many times he went through periods of depression. R.C. Sproul shares times when he went through periods of depression in his life too. So it doesn't mean that you cannot or should not be serving. It does mean that you may have to consider what you're doing and not overwhelm yourself with doing stuff that you can't really functionally do. Okay? That could happen. Here's what they say. Here's what it says in Campus Crusade. This is pretty good. Depression and other mental illnesses do not disqualify people from leadership or church roles. Experiencing depression can give people compassion or perspective in a way that actually makes them excellent leaders. Makes them better because of their own personal issues that they're battling through. Makes them better. Radical dependence on God is crucial not only for surviving depression, but also for ministry and leadership. So there is, here I left out a sentence here. Some people may need to step back from certain roles during times of deep depression, but others who struggle with depression are perfectly capable of serving and even leading in ministry activities, because it's not the matter of your depression or anxiety that you have, but the determining factor is, what is your reliance upon God? What is your reliance upon God? So if you have this dependence upon God, that's the crucial part for both surviving depression and for ministry and leadership. Just a couple more things that they're saying on this. This is especially true when people are seeking treatment or have depression that is well controlled. Though depression, like many medical conditions, may be a lifelong struggle, people often learn to cope well with resources like counseling and medication. They go on to say suffering is a universal experience. Yeah, everything. And I'm going to add this thought to it. It's not part of what Campus Crusade said, but I'm going to add this thought. Going through suffering, even abusive suffering, makes you the person you are and enables you to serve God in a unique and specific way due to what you have endured. A lot of times we go through suffering that has absolutely nothing to do with me. It's just thrust upon me. Sometimes I am abused, and that abuse is thrust upon me, has nothing to do with me. Sometimes a person will get into an abusive situation, and it does have something to do with them. And sometimes I've seen people stay in an abusive situation when they should have gotten out of the abusive situation. So we say all that, and of course all of that has a mental depression that sets in on a person because of this abuse that they have gone through. Depression will set in. Now, the hard comment to say on this is for me to finish that by saying this: going through suffering that God has allowed you to go through, even abusive suffering, makes you the person you are today and enables you to serve God in a unique and specific way due to what you had to endure. See that? That's God. That's God, who works all things together for good for those who love him. Misconception number 7, it's shameful to discuss mental illness openly. The reality is that church community should be a safe environment for people to discuss mental health without judgment. Our church ought to be a place where we have groups being able to meet together without judgment and be able to discuss. An individual ought to be able to come to the elders in the church and be able to discuss without any judgment coming from them. And each other should be able to discuss with each other. This is what embracing and encouraging each other, even to the point of confessing your faults one to another. I'm struggling with this. Have you seen a doctor? No, I don't want to. It would be wrong for me to see a doctor. No, I don't think it would be wrong. People need to hear that from their pastors rather than, no, you're probably right, that's probably wrong, your faith needs to increase. The pastor should be supportive. You do need to see a doctor about it to see if that's the root of your problems here, or some part of it. Okay. Number 8. I'm skipping over a whole lot of stuff, so if you guys want to look at this, and also Campus Crusade is cru.org, and then just look under the topic that this was, facing depression as a Christian. It'll give you this. Number 8, misconception. You can always tell if someone's depressed by outward appearances or actions. No, you cannot. Because the one thing that Christians are very good, and not only Christians, but everybody's very good, that is not showing the real self. Rather, showing up what people expect you to be or what they expect to see. Pastors often put on a facade so that nobody knows the pressures that they're going through in life. Pastors' wives find themselves in that same situation. They have to put on a facade so that nobody sees how hurt I am, or how depressed I am, or what the anxiety that is overwhelming. And nobody wants to see that out of a church, quote unquote, church leader, so I've got to put this facade on. You can't tell. You cannot tell if a Christian or if someone is going through depression or great anxiety in their life by looking at them. Here's what they say in Campus Crusade. Many people with depression are so skilled at hiding their condition that you would never know from the outside of their condition. I, Elizabeth says, have heard people say something along the lines of, but you do not look depressed. When Elizabeth went through great periods of depression in her life earlier, and people would say to her, but you don't look depressed. She says, I'm not sure what exactly people think depression should look like, but depression can look a lot of different ways. She said, you can wish you no longer existed, but look fine to the people around you. You can be so depressed that you wish you weren't even alive, but people around you don't even have a clue. Okay, and you cannot, so the point is you cannot assume someone is okay based by external appearances. And number 9 is, it's okay to talk about another person's depression or struggles with mental illness as long as they do not know that you're talking to others about them. No, it's about a prayer request. I want you to pray for Kim. She's going through real struggles in her life right now. She's very depressed. And she's really struggling with this depression. She has been for quite a while. I want you to pray for her. That's not a good thing to say, because you don't really, you don't know the cause of the depression. A person often we will relate, okay, Kim is doing something sinful. Is there a Kim in here? I try to say a name, there's nobody in here. So, because people are very judgmental, now, if we were all perfect, we could share that kind of stuff. Of course, we wouldn't have that problem would we were perfect. There's going to come a day, and this is something you can look forward to. There's coming a day when you're going to get a new body, and hey, your mind and your body are going to be in one agreement, in one accord. You're not going to have any more of these battles. I'm looking forward to that day when this body is finally done with. That my soul is done with this body. I'm looking for that day. But until that day comes, there's going to be a battle that's going to go on between my soul and my body. There's going to be a battle against sin, between my flesh and the evil one that I'm going to battle. But that I'm talking about morality type issues. But there's also a battle that's goes on in this body between the way that my brain is able to chemically function correctly due to certain genes that I've been born with, certain way that my brain functions differently than other people's brains function. And so I am going to finally be done with that one day. Something we can look forward to. This isn't going to be a forever thing. Our life is really but a vapor when you compare it to eternity. Sharing someone's struggles with mental illness without the knowledge lets other people know they need to be sensitive. Okay. My thought on this was, be careful what you say around Gary. He is struggling right now with certain things in his life. Right? So, Steve tells his good friend, Mark, you got to be careful around Pastor Gary right now. He's struggling with some things in his life. He's going through some depressive things right now. And you need to be praying for him. Right? That's not the thing to share. But the person that is it's going through the struggle, if I'm going through the struggle, me coming to you is fine. And you ought to embrace that individual because that individual comes to you. And you ought to have the wherewithal to to think your way through this and not be judgmental and not say it's because of sin, and it's not because of your lack of faith, and it's not because you're losing the spiritual battle in your life. It's number one, have you seen a therapist on this at all? Have you seen a doctor that they can check you out and see if your body is out of whack and you need some kind of chemical balance? And they can prescribe some medications that would help you through this, like having a pin inserted in your femur like Jennifer got. That really strengthened her. That helped her incredibly. Okay? Doesn't mean she can go out there and do everything, but it certainly did help her incredibly. She walks better now than she did 5 years ago because of that. That helped her. She got through that. And there's times when medications, you don't even know that you need these medications. But you go through and you find out, oh, what a relief that was. And helps you through it. That's okay. God prescribes them. God is the one that makes the medications. I'm not saying go out there and take some, however you do on the marijuana, and just stay in la la land and you know and be cozied out and don't care about anything then in your life, or and also I make a little bit of fun of marijuana, but marijuana is also something that's what's it called, cabanas or whatever it is, the stuff that whatever it is that they take is a medication for some people that really does work if used correctly. So I don't want to be too funny here. Additional thoughts here. Just one additional note, and then fortunately we're done. Look at that. The clock ends just about right. Genetics can certainly influence addiction, but it is too simplistic and even dangerous to assume that addiction is hereditary and that some genes alone can cause addiction. That being said, there are clear relationships between addictive behavior and families and how those tendencies can pass down intergenerationally. And I have, and this is my note in here, I have personally seen how depression and addictions go hand in hand. If a Christian has difficulty in certain addictions or behaviors, even those caused by heredity, a life-stifling depression often sets in. Some of us are going to go through. We have, just let me share this. I am pretty sure that I have addictions gene within me of some sort. My grandfather died as an alcoholic in our house. My father was an alcoholic clear up until he got in a truck accident and broke his back, severed his spine, and was paralyzed from waist down. My dad's only brother was an alcoholic. And I'm looking at all this, and I am 12 years old and looking at all of this and knowing all this, and I'm saying to myself, I am next in line. I knew it. I said, I am next in line. Now, I became a believer when I was 13. But right at that moment, when I'm still 12 years old, I remember making this decision. I am never going to touch alcohol. I have seen the effects of it, nightmarish effects in my personal life. And so I feel like, I get addicted to coffee. I'll let myself get addicted to coffee. I'm going to drink that stupid coffee every day. And even bring it to church with me. And when I'm traveling around in the car, I'm drinking it in the car. And when I get, okay, so I probably have the addictive gene, right? And so I let it go on that. But I really honestly and truly feel like probably if I would have allowed myself, even to this day, to start liking alcohol, I probably could not stop drinking. I'd become an alcoholic. I really am. I am so bad on addictive type things, wanting some more, that I would rather not eat a cookie than to eat one cookie. You know why? Because now I want a second, and now I got to go through this battle of, it's so much easier for me not to eat the first cookie than it is for me to eat one lousy little cookie. And so I would rather not eat that cookie. Okay, so how's that have to do with anything? I could let that be very depressive. My addiction to that could become, but instead it's not been an issue with it because I've totally abandoned it. But, so there are some, in some individuals, there's genes that's going to cause them to be addicted to things. They didn't even think about it. They've got some addictions now that's mastering over them. Okay, get some help. Get some help. I think through all of this, the one thing that we need to understand is, can we get some help? Is it okay to use doctors for help that's mental? Because mental doesn't mean you're stupid. Mental doesn't mean you're crazy. Brain is just another part of your body. Your brain is just like your heart. If your heart is not working correctly, you work at getting it to work correctly. The brain should be dealt with the same way. Father in heaven, I thank you for this time together, and pray that I just pray, Father, that you would help every individual to see that we should not be judgmental for anybody going through any kind of difficulties in their life. We should be encouragers, all of us, and we try to help one another and love one another clearly, and help individuals, any of us, who feel like depression or anxieties is a sinful thing. Help us to understand that it's not, and to go seek advice, to go see a doctor, and to get these things taken care of. You've given us a wonderful body, Lord. Thank you so much for it. But you've also brought in ways of healing this body when it's broken. Thank you for that. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.